Hey everybody, Steve Stine here. I'm so glad that you could join me today. I'm actually on the road today, so I won't be able to see your comments and things like that. But I wanted to continue our conversation. We left off last time talking about alternate picking. And what I want to talk about a little bit today is switching strings when you're doing some sort of alternate picking element, which sometimes is kind of hard to do. So that's what I want to talk about today. What I'm going to do is I'm really going to talk about like 3 different things that might help you in trying to figure out the best way of being able to do this. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about alternate picking with 2-note per string patterns. And the reason we're going to talk about a couple of these things, when we solo, when we play riffs and things like that on guitar, if we're only playing 1 note on each string, we tend to call that an arpeggio, right? So if we're playing something like that, whatever it might be. And that's generally done, if we're doing something like that, which is another conversation, that's generally done with, down picking and up picking, which we call a sweep. We're not going to be talking about that today, and we're not going to be talking about 4 notes on each string, because that isn't really a thing that you use on a regular basis when you're actually soloing. You might use it for, exercises and things like that, but for actually soloing, we don't tend to do that. Usually we play 2 notes on a string or we play 3 notes on a string. So what I want to do is just break down a couple things for you to think about. If you were playing 2 notes on a string, for instance, if you're playing something like pentatonic, what I want you to think about first is the fact that when you're playing slower and then you start trying to play faster, things are going to change a little bit in your approach on how you're trying to play these things. Be aware of that, and that's what this whole conversation is really going to be about, is you being aware of the way that you're doing things and whether or not you need to change them or whether or not they're okay the way they are, okay? So the first thing I want you to think about is if I was playing this a bit slower and I was alternate picking, so I'm going down, up, I might have more space in between my movements from my wrist. Now again, in one of the last live sessions, we talked about how you can move from your elbow predominantly, from your wrist, or from your fingers. And when I'm playing slower, I tend to put more space in between. Okay, because I have room for it. So I'm putting in a little more room so you can see I'm moving my wrist a bit more. But as the tempo increases, I've got to try and attack these strings with minimal amounts of movement because I got to get right back right away, right? That sort of thing. So what I want you to think about here is how can we make this easier for ourselves? Now, I don't have a metronome with me. I should, but I'm traveling and I forgot to bring my metronome, but I still wanted to give you a little bit to work on here. So what I want you to think about are a couple of things. I want you to think about the pick angle, your wrist angle, okay, and what those 2 things are going to do to your playing. So the first thing we're going to look at here is the pick angle. Now, basically what you have are 3 options. You can pick on the top of the string. Now again, this is just a generalization, but it'll give you an idea. You can pick on the top of the string, which means that you're turning your wrist inward like this. Okay, so what happens if you were picking towards the top of the string, okay, your pick is actually sitting at an angle where the tip of the pick is facing the floor. Okay, then you could pick at a 90-degree angle to the string, which means you're going to be kind of doing what I refer to as a pendulum. Okay, because if you tried to just pick straight through, you'd wind up running into the other strings, which can be beneficial sometimes. But for now, what we're going to be doing is just trying to pick kind of at a pendulum style like this. So I'm kind of attacking that string with a pendulum motion. Then the other thing I could do is turn and pick kind of the bottom side of this string down here. Okay? And if I'm down here, then of course my wrist is facing a bit downward, and the pick now, the pointy end of the pick is actually facing upward. Like this. So I could be down with the pick, the pointing end facing the floor, so I'm on the top side of the string. I could be doing a 90-degree angle, doing more of a pendulum, or I could be on the bottom side with the tip end of the pick facing towards the ceiling. Now, again, what I want you to do is just be aware of the fact that you've got to be doing one of those three things, right? And you might be changing as you're doing different things. Let me move this out of the way here. You might be changing as you're doing different things like that. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking time out, and hopefully we can help you a little bit with this. So what I want you to think about is when you're picking 2 notes per string, I'm going down, up, and then the next string has got to be down again. So if I was thinking about the wrist placement and the pick placement, which kind of go hand in hand here, if I was to play on the top side of the string, let's just start with that. So I played down and then up. If you think about it, if I'm playing at an angle like this, what's kind of happening is when I play the down, my pick kind of comes out and it's sitting out here. But when I play the up, I'm heading back into the body of the guitar. Which means this is kind of a bad angle to be at if you're trying to get to the next string, because you're going to have to jump over the string to get to the next one. Now, of course, you wouldn't make that dramatic a move, but that's what's actually happening if we think about this kind of logically, right? Now, if I was sitting at a 90-degree angle of the guitar string and I was doing more of a pendulum move, the goal of the pendulum is to get out of the way so you can get to the next string. Which works pretty well, actually. The only downside to it is that you're kind of wasting a lot of space and a lot of energy because you're constantly having to do this as you move. Okay, now I'm not saying that any of these are better than another one or right and wrong. I just want you to be aware of, if we were looking at kind of the mechanics of them, what's actually happening, and then you have to make a decision as to what's going to work best for you. Now, if I was sitting on the bottom side of the string, which means my guitar pick is now facing towards the ceiling, so I'm playing on this side of the string. Okay? If I think about it, if I play down, I'm kind of burying the string, but when I play the up strum, the string is kind of free, it's coming up a bit. So that's a pretty good angle to be able to get a bit more speed out of your playing, because every time you finish with that upstroke, it's now free and you can make the move to the next string. You see? Now again, all these things change depending on the speed that you're going and the comfortability and all those sorts of things, but I just want you to think about that for a minute. So if I was playing, let's just say I was taking 2 strings here. This would be a nice little exercise for you to practice. So I'm just playing 5-7, 5-7 on the 5th string and then the 4th string. Okay? What I want you to try and do is I want you to try and do that at all 3 of those angles. So you're starting, for instance, kind of at the top, so the tip of the pick is facing the floor. And see how that's working for you. And then try the pendulum. See how that feels. And then try and turn it a little bit so the pick is facing more towards the ceiling. And what you might find is that when you turn the pick a little bit, the pick tends to slide through after you do the down up, and you're already ready to go on that next down. And when you do that, what happens is, and again, this is just observation from my brain, it might be different for you, but it seems like when I do that, I don't have to move the wrist as much. Okay? And I might even start kind of locking from the elbow a little bit, depending on what's more comfortable for me, to kind of make those work. Because I can just kind of push through with it, you see? So I want you to think about those 3 things when you're practicing these exercises to kind of figure out what feels best. Now, I'm going to finish up this conversation and give you one other thing to think about a little bit that's kind of fun to practice that might benefit you as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to think about the pick angle in terms of this, in terms of lifting, like pulling it in like this. Now, generally, what I like to do is I like to play with a fairly flat pick against the string because it gives me more percussion. You whatever it is that I'm playing. So I get a little more percussion off the string as I'm trying to play. But there are times, I always think of like Eric Johnson, there are times where you might want to turn that pick a little bit because it creates less friction to the string and it's going to get you across the string a bit more smoothly. And it's also going to change the tone a bit. As you try and play. So what you can learn to do a little bit is just pull in a little bit with that finger. You see how I'm just kind of pulling in like this? Okay, and you can turn that pick just a little bit. Now I wouldn't recommend doing this for everything that you do, but maybe if you're trying to play a certain passage and you need a little bit less friction to kind of smooth yourself through those strings, you could certainly try and pull in just a little bit, and then again, depending on what angle you're at here, it might make a really big difference in the pattern that you're trying to play. Now I haven't warmed up for the day yet, but I would strongly suggest doing so before you start trying to rush into these sorts of things. Right now we're just talking about exploration, but if we really wanted to work on execution, you know, the first thing we need to do is just really get warmed up and decide on what patterns we're going to work on and that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to be doing with those 2-note per string ideas. Now, what I want you to think about as well is when we start moving into the 3-note per string patterns, which is really just going down, up, down. Now I'm going to be using just A major here, so I'm going 5, 7, 9, down, up, down, and then I get to the next string, which is also 5, 7, 9, and generally I'm going to play this with an up, so I go down, up, down, up, down, up. Okay, so I'm making that transition from down, and then up, down, up. So if we think about it again, I have to try and make sure that that down, I go down, up, down, and that up is cleared to be able to hit the next string. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this way a little bit with my pick. Again, all these, you can try all of these same techniques that we've just talked about. But what I want you to think about a little bit is if I turn up a little bit this way so the tip of the pick is facing downward, when I play down, up, down, the pick again is free. Where if I turned this way like I did when I was doing the 2-note ones, I'd have down, up, down, and I'd be burying that pick. Now I could try pendulum, right, and see if that helps, or I could play at a bit of an angle. Okay, so I have down, up, down, and then now my up is free to do up, down, up. Okay, now if I think about it, if I go down, up, down, at an angle here, down, up, down, it kind of frees that pick. So when I do this one, I've got up, down, up, well, it's kind of burying it again, right? So this is where that pendulum idea kind of comes in handy. Okay, now again, I think a lot of this is just perception because we overanalyze some of these things, and there's still got to be a natural element that's happening with our playing. I'm just trying to get you to kind of think about this a little bit. But it seems like if I turn the wrist up a little bit like this with the pick kind of facing towards the floor, it makes it a little bit easier for me to get through those strings when I'm trying to do this alternate picking idea. So just keep these things in mind and practice those and think about it a little bit. You know, do you need to pull the pick in a little bit? Do you need to move the wrist a little bit so you're picking on one side of the string or the other? And really what's happening is you're just turning the pick a little bit to try and free up some space, or whether or not you're playing at a 90-degree angle and you're doing more of a pendulum idea as you move across those strings. Now the last thing I want to talk about is what a lot of people refer to as economy picking. And basically what I'm talking about is you might play down, up, down, and then when you're done, instead of playing an up, down, up following that, you might decide to continue with the down pushing through, kind of like you would if you were sweep picking. So you go down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. Now this is not a real comfortable picking style for me, but it works wonders for other people out there. So I want you to be aware that this is available to you. So you'd go, and it feels quite nice. I've just never really developed it to a faster speed. So I'm going, So you're playing down, up, down, and you're pushing through, and that down is already connecting. Right? So that's what you're doing, is pushing through, and then you'd continue with your up. And again, be aware that that is an option that you have. I'm the last person to sit and tell you that there's only this way to do something or something like that. If you can make something work for you, that's exactly what you're looking for, because we're all vastly different that way. So just be aware as we start shifting through these strings, doing groups of 2 or groups of 3, that you might want to think about the pick angle a little bit, and you might want to think about pulling in a little bit if needed to try and create some less friction to get through those strings, okay? Now, I'm not going to do it right now because you're never going to see me if I stand up, but the other thing I want you to think about as you're practicing these things are once in a while, then I'll probably do a video on it sometime, but practice these things standing up. It's really important. Don't just practice them sitting down unless you're planning on having the guitar right here when you stand up. You want to get used to being able to stand up and practice these various things too, to see how that feels if you're ever planning on playing standing up, right, in front of an audience or whatever it might be, or with a band. So think about that a little bit as you're playing. And I think that's about all I have for today for you, but hopefully that helps you a little bit. So again, stay positive, keep practicing, keep thinking about the kinds of things that you're working on, and I will try and get to your questions and everything like that as soon as this live sequence is over. So sorry that I had to be in a hotel room, but I am traveling, but I didn't want to forget about you. So take care and have a wonderful day, all right?